are going live in five, four, three, two, one. First, I would like to start off by saying I do not own the rights to this video. This is pretty much LCK's Spring 2018 match in League of Legends. It is relevant for we are talking about in its entirety esports versus traditional sports and how what's the future of esports. So pretty much to start us off, we all know that being able to watch entertainment is easy to come by in this day and age, from YouTube to Twitch and other online streaming outlets. The digital age is pretty much out there in the open. With all these different outlets, promoting games has been easier than ever. With so much coverage of these games and having professionals perform for audiences, esports shows up on the scene with a large fan base, sporting over 300 million tuning in worldwide to esports. It's projected that in the next 3 years, those numbers will nearly double. With ESPN and Turner Cable also broadcasting esports tournaments and competitions, this phenomenon offers a new and exciting platform for brands to reach out to audiences at that scale, particularly millennials and Generation Z. The events themselves also provide brands with great product testing grounds and opportunities to offer discounts to event attendees and viewing audiences. It is no brainer for any brand wanting to reach this demographic. So, pretty much in this podcast today, we're looking to cover the future of esports, how it pertains to traditional esports, and should they work together to make sports themselves good? I'm gonna present my first question to my first guest and currently my only guest. You can introduce yourself.
Hi guys, my name is Akil. Um, yeah, um, so yeah, if I understand you right, we're looking
Where
there.
I guess to start, um, do you think that esports should be considered a sport?
Um, if I'm speaking for, if I'm giving my own opinion, I do. Um, the amount of strategy, the amount of strategy and effort and skill and practice that it takes to go into being a professional esport player, it definitely should be considered. Excuse me, should definitely be considered a sport. Um, Now I get why a lot of people would say it's not in the more traditional sense. Everybody wants to see someone throw a ball or tackle somebody or hit somebody. And if you want to get specific, a lot of people would consider uh, video games or esports something more in the line of like blackjack or backgammon, something more considered of a game, not so much in the sports sense. But if you have people competing, you have a wide viewership, you have skill-based rules and objectives, then it's considered a sport, and in any shape and fashion. Um, and esports is incredibly unique for the fact that it's one of those things that you consider a sport without having to build up your physical body in the traditional sense.
Well, just to play devil's advocate, the term sports is strongly associated with physical training and empowerment. Um, I'm not gonna sound like I'm being harsh towards some of the uh, professional e players, but some of them are not physically fit. And yes, the game requires like skill, but we're talking not in the terms of mental. I mean, it does play a role in basketball, football, and pretty much any traditional sport, but it's mind and body. I don't for some of the traditional audiences, they would be like, well, these guys are just moving their fingers, like, and
I
they.
mean, okay. So with it, in that regard, where is the limit, and how can that be measured? You're moving your fingers, but these some of these players can quote unquote move their fingers faster and harder than plenty of people in the world. I mean, if we're looking at the physical aspect of it, um, it's a little strange to zoom in on, but their eye coordination and hand coordination is far above many other players. And I don't want to get too out there and start jumping into like the Matrix or anything else like that. But how would you define a conversation? How would you define an interaction? How would you define a meeting? These things are being redefined by digital and online spaces, and the same could be said for, activity. What a lot of people, especially in maybe some of the boomers nowadays, don't consider texting to be a real conversation. But for someone my age or younger, texting is often the only kind of way you want to have a conversation. Um, so with the addition of esports and being able to play it out online, it's there are some definitions that'll need some tweaking, and because the way we understand and human interaction is changed by the internet, the same can be said for sports.
I mean, listen, I am all for anyone using their and again, this is me playing devil's advocate.
No, no.
I'm all for anybody using their personal time for whatever choices that they make if they want to play games, but there are parents and people that's looking to send their children into sports. Usually, those athletes, minus injuries and small minor occasions where they might become hurt, they're putting their kids in a situation where their child has to be remotely healthy to function really well in a physical activity. So, how I'm going to relate this to our discussion versus esports is: are these esport players healthy? Like, do they have to be healthy in a sense to play this game? Like if I send my child to an esports school where they can learn how to play any esport, is their physical condition gonna deteriorate because they're sitting in front of a computer all day? You see, like
Um,
you that
y-
in.
that's a good question, but I would watch the way and the way you word it. Uh, Only because video games and sports are, in a sense, very ableist. It is only available to those with fully functioning bodies, and yes, there are, you know, there with with the caveat that there are spaces in which people with any sort of disability or any needing any sort of extra help. These spaces exist, and the same can be said for video games. Uh, but it's clear that in a sense, video games is also very empowering to individuals who maybe say can't get up and kick a soccer ball around because they don't have access to their feet. Maybe there was an accident, or they were simply born with some sort of muscular atrophy or anything like that. Um, but I get that is a fair understanding, but I mean that is a fair concern. But everything comes with balance. Like if a basketball player stayed in the gym and played for 18 hours a day, he would pull a hamstring, he would hurt himself, he would cause, muscular skeletal damage. And if that were to happen, then there would be a chance that he wouldn't be able to play anymore. There's balance. You have to keep your mind sharp and your body sharp. And if we were going to, as far as to offer a regimen or something like that, I would definitely put some sort of, physical a little bit more of a physically strenuous activity for at least like an hour or two or something to match with with all the play that you have, because runners, their knees deteriorate. There's always a cost of what exercise or what thing you're going through, because when you put your body through that kind of stress to be able to perform on what we consider to be a competitive level, your careers don't last forever. This is why, they say, don't just play basketball, go to college. Don't just play soccer, do whatever. Well, soccer is a different one because their lifespan, their career span is a lot longer. But you can only do something for so long, and professional gaming is it should be held in that same regard. There are going to be goods and bads, and there are going to be ways to have to balance it. Um, but for as going back to it, for a lot of people, you know gaming isn't just a sport that they want to do, but it's the only sport. Of course, there are still ableist functions of gaming, especially to that of the hearing and visual impaired, not being able to properly, for the most part, interact with video games. But for people who have major motor function issues within their legs or their arms, and can still manage to hold and use a controller, it's a very empowering and liberating art for them. So it is very much in a sense should still be considered a sport, and it should be taken and looked at in every light.
Um, I'm gonna continue playing this advocate. Um, there has been a lot of reports linking children and even adults to a certain degree of violence pertaining from these video games. Uh, Compared to regular sports, it is part of the game itself where you're gonna clash with people sometimes if you're playing football or high contact sports, and like there is fighting, but the fighting is usually brought on from regular aggression and frustration from the game. Uh, it seems that some of the shooters, that children, pretty much kids in college, that has played violent video games. I'm not saying it directly caused them to be violent people, but would you say that any of these esports would cause unnatural aggression within people?
Not anything more than any other sport or interaction would cause. The idea that video games cause mass shootings and things like that is ludicrous. Um, Actually, in recent research, it shows that people who play video games are less likely to be violent, as these video games act as an outlet of said aggression. Esports is a very contentious point to speak on, which I'll admit. Do I think that esports players are more likely to be more violent than a football player or a basketball player? Absolutely not. You have football players that are beating their wives and they can still throw that football around as long as it's making you know the NFL money. You have all these different sport people. You have all these different people who play sports, and they are aggressive, and it seems like it's acceptable, especially within this I hate to use the term, but within this patriarchal meta masculine society. But that's not necessarily the case. Like, we get it, testosterone is boiling, people are moving, accidents happen, and yeah, sometimes people react in aggression. um and that's just people, especially when when you have all of our kids and players being hyped up on this aggression, being paraded as heroes and masters of the body for being the most aggressive, the most dominant, the most masculine that they can be. um and this is even transferred over into women's sports, which is also why women's sports just aren't as attractive or as popular, because it lacks this male aggression. And that's literally not to say that it doesn't lack aggression, because female sports get pretty brutal. There is that, but there's the male factor that's not there. But before I go off on a tangent, um,
I want
there's
to
there
I want to counter
yeah, go.
you. I want to counter you there real
Go
quick
ahead.
with women's sports, and I'm talking about traditional women's sports. Uh, in 2016 and 2017, the female soccer team has been way more popular than the male one, at least in America standards. But
I wouldn't say popularity, but I would definitely agree with achievement. 2016, 2017, I mean, like we didn't even make it to this year's the male team didn't even make it to this year's World Cup. The female team has been far more successful, and it's been fantastic. And yes, this success has brought popularity to it, but this is also something to consider within the American framework of soccer not being the most popular sport in America, that being NFL and basketball. Um, but
I
yeah,
actually think baseball outweighs them both.
they in America, I don't think they do, but we can run research on that because esports is about as popular as baseball at this moment. Baseball is very much more popular worldwide than both of them, as is soccer. But within the American framework, I believe football and base basketball pulls up higher. But we can do a quick Google search on that. What is the most popular sport in America? Take that back. It's number one is basketball. Number two is football. So got them switched, but we're close. And number three is baseball. And according to Newzoo, uh, esport viewership is about just as popular or was just as popular within 2016 as baseball. So there definitely is. This is definitely is a conversation worth having. Esports is becoming incredibly popular. Um, but the point I was trying to make before was there there there's no more aggression in one sport than the other. And this can always be case by case, but because a lot of this is virtual, what you find in competitive games is this sort of aggression that might play out in physical violence in hockey or basketball or football is played out as verbal abuse or aggression. Slinging out the n words whenever people get upset, slinging out derogatory gender terms or homophobic slurs that come out. Um, this was noticed in forgot the player's name, XXSO something, a couple months back in the Overwatch League.
Ah,
He made
yes, he was
Yeah,
banned,
yeah,
permanent
he was
ban.
banned for making a homophobic slur, and this shows that the aggression or the aggression around competitive gaming is very much there, and it's not it didn't somehow go away because people aren't physically attacking each other. And while this is problematic, this is just another shred showing that the competitive levels are still there and can still kind of be considered as a sport. um but we can get into all the issues and problems of competitive gaming because there is a lot of them. I love me some video games, but I'd be lying to say if I'd be lying if I said they were perfect.
Oh, I don't think any sport is perfect. I think football, even though it shows off your masculinity and your unity as a team, puts you in literally physical harm to pretty much entertain uh, an audience. I love fighting. I love UFC, but if we're just gonna sit here and ignore the fact that two people are literally causing concussions and other like dangerous maneuvers to harm another person for sport, it kind of turns off kind of bad. And that's one thing I do like about esports. Esports, you'll have your aggression and pretty much it'll be taken out on the enemy team in a video game. Maybe you will have an argument with them in real life, but there's safety there for the most part. And most of these professional teams are aware they're on TV. So they're not gonna just get up and run run out of their seat and go punch the other guy in his face on TV. There's too much time in between desks, and there's two different managers to keep them calm in case they were going to that next step. Um,
Oh, I mean, you're very much right. But I wanna point out two things that you said there. Um, I want to point out the masculinity aspect of football, and let's see if we can explore how that like translates over into esports, because I don't personally think the masculinity aspect of football to be something of of endearment, simply because it has a way of recreating this toxic masculinity that exists within American culture so prominently. You have players who beat their wives. You have players who run out there and fight for concussions and things like that. And this is to no way put down any of the football players. They're great at their jobs. They're working hard. You have people like Colin Kaepernick who are aware of aware of the political turmoil that this country faces and whatnot. And at the end of the day, the players are not responsible for what the NFL believes in and what they portray. But like it or not, the NFL is popular or most popular among a conservative, anti-liberal, audience. This, we can say red, Republican, whatever. Um,
Hmm.
this is evident largely because they have a lot of ideas or ideologies that tend to run, right within the conservative wheelhouse, overt masculinity, homophobia, violence, things like that. And this isn't to say that conservatives are any more violent than liberals, but they very much show it. They very much wear it on their wrist a lot more. Um, and this masculinity, or at least we perceive this masculinity to portray or to be believed as aggressive acts and to be I can like as hard and as great and strong as I can be, then I'm the most masculine and therefore I am the most uh desired or most wanted player and all these kind of things. And the fans back this up, the NFL backed this up, and like you said, these people are getting concussions, these people are hurting themselves, um, and there's been very little to apply better safety measures within the NFL. Now this doesn't, of course, necessarily hop out to me of everything else like that because players as long as they're informed. Players should know what they're getting into, and if they still want to play whatever else. And you mentioned UFC. There's no doubting that in a sense it could be a barbaric sport, but I love UFC. I am a big fighting fan and practice multiple martial arts despite being uh, or at least entering academia. So this kind of stuff is it's still beloved despite what they are. But when you look at how that transfers over right to esports, it's clear that America loves this type of violent masculine nature, and esports being worldwide, this kind of behavior is transferred over. The aggression that you would show, like I said before, on the football field gets transferred over into verbal abuse and other things like that. And yeah, there's no physical danger or anything else like that, but it creates a toxic space within gaming and that of esports. So you're now finding that all these lovely football players and all these lovely, people that wouldn't be aggressive or play sports in a sense are still adopting this toxic masculine nature as it is just a popular stance within America. It's popular to shit talk and to be as rude and as abrasive as possible, and to be as and to just let your emotions fly because that's seen as masculinity and masculinity is desirable. And even though you don't get hurt, these behaviors still manifest in different ways within esports.
But what would you say would be the negative consequences of these same emotions?
Um, well, other than what I mentioned before in verbal abuse, I looking at it in more of a big picture dynamic. Um, you have to also look at the majority of who's represented, who's playing, what's happening. So 50 to 60% of Americans play video games. Um, and despite that, about 73% of all video game characters are male, and little over 50% are white. This in turn shapes the AAA titles that come out and shapes the player base in a sense. But more than anything, shapes the community because you have this very much largely white male majority being represented within gaming, but not being reflective of the actual player base because because women make up about 4 out of 10 of the average gamer, and minorities are just as likely, according to the Pew Research Center, to refer to themselves as gamers. So both minorities and women make large percentages of these games, but yet we are not the ones being represented. Um, this, in a sense, takes hold within gaming as black people don't play video games, women don't play video games. You know, the stigma of white male characters only playing video games is continued within it. So without the visual representation of say football or basketball, where the players are all black, and that's a completely different issue, um, you have the manifestation of, in a sense, a white almost racist space within gaming, and this white racist space can often be synonymous with this toxic masculinity that continues in a sense of just being anti-minority and anti-women. And this kind of comes from sports culture in a sense of girls can't play the same level of sports that we can, and we're just going to be complete assholes and everything else like that. Then it's also enhanced by the anonymity of the computer that we play with. You know, there are very little repercussions for the people who play unless they play at a professional level. If we're going to speak in just if we're speaking of just major esports, then of course we're seeing like with the player that got banned from Overwatch that there are repercussions for what you say and do, and that's how it should be. But that same repercussions don't play out for the average player. So beating your wife and screaming that on esports won't really have any effect on you. But the main point that I'm making before I ramble again is that masculinity, or not necessarily masculinity, because that would be painting with too broad of a stroke. But with toxic masculinity, the idea that men can only be men by being aggressive and being abrasive and putting down everybody else around them, doubled or coupled with this perceived whiteness or this perceived notion of natural whiteness within gaming has created, in a sense, a just super toxic environment in that sense.
My question to you, because I know you're tired, and we've actually been at this for practically a half an hour, which is generally the goal time for this small pod. Um, let's talk about the future of esports. Do you think that esports will? All right, we'll break it down into two different questions. Um, you know, times come and there's different changes out there in the world, and some things over time just get negated, if you know what I mean. They become obsolete. Perfect example of this is like old console systems. You know, PS1 came out in practically 91, and and from there it's been obsolete. Do you think esports will make traditional sports obsolete, especially with the declining watch rates of NFL Super Bowls?
Um, Other than the NFL just being a belligerent,
I
semi
yeah.
semi racist thing, whatever, they kind of deserve. But okay, the question of do I think esports will overtake physical sports? For me, the answer is no. If they are to overtake it, it would have to be at a point where esports are up and live on the screen, where every high school has an esports team, and everybody is out here placing their domino bets on esport players and stuff like that. And the reality is it's not that big. Um,
So are you? Oh, wait,
eh,
before you continue, are you saying that it won't get that big?
no, no, no. It definitely can, and most likely internet and playability and access to games becomes more readily available. But we have to understand that esports is a very privileged set. It's a very privileged space. You need to be able to afford said gaming system. You need to be able to afford connections. You need to be able to afford your setup, which can run, between $1,000 to $3,000, depending, unless you're doing like a simple PS4 setup or something like that, which can then cost you like 600. But not everybody has the same access to esport playing conditions. So it then gets very hard for everybody to come in and join within the community. So I do think esports is only going to get bigger and better as people get more access and people become more aware of what's available to them in esports. I also think that once, because of the capital gain or the economic gain of esports continue to rise, there are going to be way more people that jump into it. I mean, we just saw Samsung's team take the victory in the League of Legends recent tournament, and that's just one example of major companies coming to take participate within esports, and it's only going to get bigger. It's only going to get. I do think that there are a lot of issues that we need to address within esports, like I said, with diversity and all this other stuff, but that isn't part of the question. Uh, but no, I think it's only going to get bigger. It's not going to overtake physical sports. Maybe not in these recent decades, but you will see a huge burst of popularity and it'll continue rising. Games like League of Legends and other popular watched esport games have the benefit of having patches. So they're never really going to run into the problem of obsolete hardware, because everything is connected, everything is just uploaded. You may get a new computer, but the connection of the internet will largely stay the same. And then once they update their game and keep it accessible, then there's no reason for it to fall out. And even if these games were to die, there'll be other games to play in the future. There are tons of people working on stuff. There's always someone trying to, you know, knock off, Dota, League of Legends,
Overwatch.
Overwatch, Fortnite from their heavenly plateaus and take their spot. So yeah, it's only gonna get larger.
According to ESPN, actually, their analyst has said that within the next 3 years, that the viewership of esports is gonna practically double, and within 10 years, just to correct your previous statement, within 10 years they're gonna rival basketball and football. And I don't know. The future that you predict seems to be a little askew. I mean, anything could happen between now and 10 years where it could shift that, but it's on the run to actually overthrow. I'm sorry, become number one in viewership compared to traditional sports.
Well,
So
that would be great. I mean, I can only make predictions and
I know
that.
I definitely asked you for your opinion. It wasn't like me just setting this up
No, no,
to
no,
like,
no,
yeah,
no.
uh
It,
yeah.
it's fine. I mean, the question was more of will it overtake and completely overshadow these physical sports, and I don't think so yet. But like I said, I do think that there's a possibility in which that this stuff will happen, and I think it'll be a little longer than 10 years. But if it happens in 10 years, awesome. I'm a gamer. I'd love to jump on to that and see where this goes. I'd love to see every high school have an esports team and fully take advantage of the virtual capabilities of esports. But like I said, there are issues that need to be addressed and answers, and we'll get to those another day.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm not looking to go continue this podcast for more than another 5 minutes. I'm pretty much gonna wrap this up pretty soon. I just have one last major question for you. Is um, tell me your esport of choice. why. And since I'm having a good inkling, your favorite game is probably going to be League of Legends. What role do you play? And who's your favorite character for that role?
Um, okay. Esports of choice, even though I like fighting games, throw into it. So I'm gonna go with League of Legends, like you guessed. Um, I main mid. Favorite character is going to be Anivia. She took me to Diamond season 2 seasons ago, and I'm sitting like crappily, like floating in like platinum right now. I mean, to be honest, graduate school has been a lot, but yeah, Anivia mid main, the only way to go, baby.
Well, Mr. Kill, Mr. Icy Wolf, I have to thank you for coming on the podcast. This is podcast number 2. I'm looking to do this once a week, where I will have Mr. Icy Wolf and some other close friends join me over Discord, and we'll just tackle topics from gaming to everyday life into stuff more than this. You know, like whatever is the hot topic for the time being. I would like to thank everybody for tuning into my show, and hopefully you guys enjoyed, learned something new, and maybe even became interested in esports itself. If any of those things happened, or you really just enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe to my channel. And I'm looking forward to speaking to you guys again. And better luck next time. This is Azor Frost, and I'm signing out. And I want you to enjoy your night and be safe. Till next time.